Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Kyle. I'm the owner and founder of HireUA, and today we're going to be talking about the differences between freelancers and solopreneurs and actual business owners. Before we get started, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. There's lots of new videos coming about outsourcing, operations, hiring overseas, and of course, life in Ukraine. Lots more coming, so make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for that. Now, before we kind of get into this, let's first define what a solopreneur is. This can often be interchanged with freelancers, and I would say a lot of digital nomads fall under this category as well. This is an individual who works for themselves. They're not necessarily running a whole business. They don't have a team. They don't maybe have operational procedures. It's usually just them, which means that one, they're responsible for getting all of the business. Two, they're responsible for fulfilling all of the business. And three, it all starts and ends with them. The big difference to me is that at the end of, say, building a business, you have an asset that can be sold. Assuming that you have a lead gen and you have ways of acquiring customers that aren't necessarily tied to you and your face and your personal brand, it makes it a lot easier to then sell that business, move on to whatever else you want to do in life. In comparison, if you're a freelance web designer or you're a solopreneur, email copywriter, whatever it might be, when you're done, right? Nobody can just take on that business. You can't just necessarily sell your client base. In some businesses, like for example, accounting, you'll see like all the time, you'll see old accounting guys that have been around for 30, 40 years, they sell their client book to somebody else who's coming in, maybe an up and coming accountant who's kind of taking over the firm, and they might be able to pass off the majority of those clients to that new person. I don't think it necessarily works that easily when it comes to, say, freelance web design or graphic design, video editing, copywriting, whatever service you want to sell as a freelancer or solopreneur. Once you're done, you're done. That's just it. Maybe you have some sort of book with some recurring revenue. Maybe you're able to pass that off and take a cut. But if you think about it, that doesn't work, right? If you're an email copywriter and you say to let's say you have 20 clients that you work for on a monthly basis. That would be a lot of clients, obviously. And you say, hey, Mr. Client, like I'm done with email copywriting. I'm going to pass you off to, Average Joe over here, and he's going to take over. Unless Average Joe can immediately step in and get results for this client, he's just going to axe him, right? There's a million other copywriters he can go and hire out there. So there's no reason for him to actually stick with Average Joe if Average Joe is in fact average. So therefore, the likeliness that Average Joe would actually pay you for that business is pretty slim. Solopreneurs are typically working from home or they're working from a coffee shop. Like I said, digital nomads are often in this realm. They're constantly traveling around. Maybe they, move to a new place every month, and that's got a whole set of pitfalls in and of itself. I was a digital nomad for a few years. I have lived that life. It is great in some ways, but also not really what it's chalked up to be in other ways when you're moving to a new country, a new city, and having to start over every other month or every other 3 months, whatever it might be. In contrast, a business owner is someone who owns and manages a company. They likely have a team. They have some sort of operational standards and procedures that must be followed, and potentially they have a broader scope of services. There tends to be a mindset though with solopreneurs and freelancers, and this is obviously painting with a very broad brush. Like there's definitely freelancers and solopreneurs who do very well for themselves, and they're not hesitant to reinvest in themselves and reinvest in their businesses. But something that's very, very common in the freelancing world and the solopreneur world is a bit of a poverty mindset. And it really makes a lot of sense if you start thinking about it, because if you go on, say, Upwork or you go on Fiverr, everybody's simply trying to just underbid each other, right? If someone's willing to sell this service for $10, there's a chump out there willing to sell it for $2, and there's someone under him willing to sell it for $1, whatever it might be. It's just a race to the damn bottom, which is not how you actually build a business. That's not how you keep clients. Like I tell you, it's so true. The client who you're charging $500 a month, they are the person who wants you to move heaven and earth for them, no matter what time of day it is, no matter what it is. They expect you to solve the problem. They expect you to over deliver. Whereas the $10,000 client is the one who says, oh, great, get it to me when you're done. Typically, the people with more money simply have less problems. They are easier to work with. They are more of a joy to work with. They are more forgiving. They have been through the ups and downs. They don't come from a scarcity mindset. Whereas the person who is that $500 client, $500 is probably a lot to them. Someone who's willing to drop $10,000 a month on a service obviously has some means and has some income. So it'll be a lot easier to sell and to work with that person. It's just constantly nickel and diming, like, oh, I can't spend $10 on this software service, even though it would make my life way easier. I'm nickel and diming. And a very common thing when you're, for example, living in Thailand or you're living in Colombia and you're trying to get by on, say, $1,500, $2,000 a month, it makes sense then that you're kind of skimping out out where you can. You're not willing to reinvest that money back into your business because you need every penny to live your life. And that's just how it goes sometimes. But repeatedly, I have seen that overall mindset of solopreneurs and freelancers is not a winning mindset in the long term. You can absolutely get by, you can make a living, you can probably even be very comfortable, but at the end of the day, when you're constantly being compared to the same people who are all racing to the bottom, it doesn't put you in a good position. Solopreneurs are often afraid to spend money on themselves. Like, they don't want to invest in training, they don't want to invest in resources or a team, and they don't want to spend money on ads. Whereas businesses know that every time that you spend money, you're trying to make money back. Every time you invest in you and your business, typically you're rewarded with that. You know, the more you kind of put out into the world, the more you tend to get back. And I know that sounds cheesy, it's the reality. Every time you spend and invest money in yourself, it usually comes back to you as long as you've applied that knowledge, and you're way more likely to actually make use of those materials and apply that knowledge if you've invested in it. So how many times have you downloaded a free guide or a free ebook, whatever it might be, and you don't ever use it? But when you drop $10,000 on a training program, whatever it might be, you're sure as hell gonna go all in on that. You're gonna use that. You're gonna absolutely dedicate yourself to learning whatever that skill might be. And that is a huge difference between a business owner and a solopreneur. A lot of people will start off their online business career, their online business journey, you know, trying to become an entrepreneur. They will often start as a sort of solopreneur because that's just easier, right? There's less overhead. You don't need anything to get going. It's as simple as uploading a photo to Upwork or Fiverr and then basically saying, this is my service, and trying to go out, bid on jobs, or if you're using a platform like Fiverr, you know, people are coming to you and they're buying your gigs or, you know, whatever it is. Way too many solopreneurs never transition out of that. They never say, okay, it's now time to bring on a team member and it's time to get myself out of some of this day-to-day grind so that I'm freed up to actually grow the business. And a lot of them are just so stuck up on, if I hire somebody, I'm responsible for that person. And that is the burden of the business owner. When you're the business owner, everything comes back to you. It's that simple. If you're gonna be a solopreneur, you're never going to get out of that grind. Even best case scenario, you get a couple clients, they pay you every month, it's consistent work, you just have to do it, it doesn't take up too much of your time. Great, fantastic, but what happens when you lose one of those clients? What happens if you lose two of those three? Are you in a position then where you're having to scramble and then go out and find more clients? More than likely, yes. And then of course, you're in a position where you're not in the right state of mind because you're desperate. If you've just lost 66% of your business, yeah, you're gonna be pretty freaking desperate to close the next deal, which means you're more likely to take on a bad client who's gonna waste more of your time and energy and ultimately just suck the life out of you, and you're likely to take bad deals. When you are moving forward and you're always making progress, you're always trying to sign new deals, you often have an overflow of leads, you have an overflow of cash, and that way when a bad situation comes around, you're more likely to walk away from it. But if you're a solopreneur and again, you've lost 66% of your business, you're gonna be taking whatever deal comes your way. And you might just sit there and say, oh, well, it's just temporary. I'm only signing this client. I'll work with them for a few months. I'll get my cash flow back up. I'll find somebody else. That's oversimplifying it. It doesn't necessarily always work out that way. If you're just getting started in business, it can be tough to wrap your head around the idea of paying somebody and, you know, them depending on you for their living. It ultimately will result in you having a better living. And it's really as simple as when you then take on a client and you get someone else to fulfill that work and you still put a profit, you can then take that money and reinvest into getting more clients. And that way, instead of only having those 3 to 5 clients that you're so dependent on, no matter how good they are, things change in the world. That way you actually have a business and an operation that does lead gen automatically. You've got somebody who's constantly outreaching, constantly making new sales. You've got somebody who's fulfilling it. You've got somebody who is taking all that fulfillment, getting testimonials, putting it back into the sales cycle. All these different things then work in synergy to the point where you actually are then building an operation, you're building a team, you're building an actual ecosystem that runs without you. Because if you're a solopreneur, you're a freelancer and you want to take a month off, guess what? Unless you're able to do that work in advance, how are you getting that work done? What if you need to sign new clients? You don't have a lead gen specialist. You don't have someone closing your deals for you. It's just you. And maybe some people prefer that. Maybe truly some people do. But I think there's also a lot of solopreneurs and freelancers who would like to become business owners. And taking that step involves putting down on paper, into processes, the things that you do in your freelancing or your solopreneur business that will allow somebody else to come in and start to take parts of that over. If you do that, that, it's going to be more painful at the start, but ultimately what you're gonna do is buy your time and your freedom back down the road. Because then when you're a web designer and you have somebody who's doing outreach for you, or you have somebody who's closing the deals for you, or best of all, you have someone doing the actual design for you, that means that you can sign a client, give the designer the project scope, and you can go on vacation. Whereas if you are a solopreneur and you want to go on vacation, guess what? That project is not getting done. In conclusion, solopreneurs, digital nomads, freelancers, they all tend to be lumped together. They often have a very poor mindset in regards to business and how to conduct things. And ultimately, I do believe a lot of solopreneurs and freelancers would like to be business owners and are just having a hard time taking that next step. I'm here to tell you it is not the most difficult thing in the world. All you have to do is start systemizing and operationalizing what you have in your freelancing business, put it down, put it in a training section, and then you have to be willing to trust someone. You have to be willing to hand the reins off to somebody and allow them to grow and prosper. If you're constantly looking over their shoulder and you're constantly nagging and you're constantly worried that they can't actually do the job, guess what? They're probably not going to do a very good job. So you have to be willing to take a chance on somebody, and you have to be willing to let control go. Ultimately, that can be very tough as a business owner. A lot of us are control freaks to some extent. That's how we got where we are. But it is very important that you learn to let go and trust people and learn how to delegate effectively. If you know how to do it effectively, there is no limit to the skies that your business can reach. If you're looking for help outsourcing, delegating, and building a team, if you're looking to become a business owner instead of a freelancer or solopreneur, go to HireUA.com. We place premium talent into people's businesses and save them 80% or more off typical hiring costs in the United States, and we'll do it in just 5 days. Book a call, and one of the sales team members who I have delegated to over the last couple of years will speak to you about your hiring needs, and we're looking forward to putting someone great into your business. Take care.